Alaska's oldest cold case, who murdered Celia Beth Van Zanten? Was it family, friend, or a serial killer? Celia Beth Van Zanten was born on July 30th, 1953 in Anchorage, Alaska, to civil engineer and World War II Army veteran John Jacob Jack Van Zanten and gifted artist Enid Kathleen Kelper. She was raised in a very close-knit Mormon family. Beth had a fair complexion and long blonde hair. She was described as intelligent, friendly, and an extrovert, even though she was quite naive. She was also described as quiet at times, shy, reserved, and boy-crazy. Beth loathed strangers and wanted to build a quote, complex of lodges back in the bush that would only be occupied by people of her choice, end quote. She liked to walk everywhere, but thought hitchhiking was dangerous and wanted it abolished. On December 22, 1971, Beth was 18 years old and a student at Anchorage Community College. She shared a house with her 3 older brothers and her cousin named Greg on Knick Avenue in South Anchorage, near Northern Lights Boulevard. Her parents lived in another house also in Anchorage. That afternoon, Beth had gone shopping with her mother, aunt, and cousin. According to her aunt, Beth was very happy and was looking forward to Christmas. After the shopping trip, Beth went home to watch the movie The Whole World Is Watching with 2 of her 3 brothers. The movie was already in progress, and everyone that was there was allegedly smoking marijuana. Allegedly, at some point during the evening, Beth decided that she wanted some soda. They didn't have any soda at their house, so Beth bundled up and headed toward a local convenience store named Bilo, which was only a few blocks away. She waited to leave until the commercial break that was somewhere around 8:30 p.m. Before she left, she told her brothers that she was supposed to babysit for one of her cousin's friends and to have him wait until she returned. Beth had to hurry because Bilo closed at 9 p.m. A witness last saw Beth walking to the Bilo between 8:45 p.m. and 9 o'clock p.m. A second witness said they saw Beth walking away from her house around 10. Another witness claimed to have seen Beth hitchhiking between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. Several neighbors also claimed to have seen Beth hitchhiking, including one who said she had picked her up in the past. Neighbor Jay Dice claimed to have seen Beth around 9 p.m., headed south on Captain Hook Drive toward Northern Lights Boulevard. Beth was standing under a lamppost and talking to someone in a dark-colored car that had stopped. The car had a door open and appeared to be headed south on Captain Cook. The neighbor said he did not see Beth get in the car. Beth never returned home. She never made it to Bilo either. Her brothers didn't report her missing until 2 days later. They assumed that her cousin had picked her up on the way to the store and had taken her to babysit. On Christmas Day, brothers Dennis and Gary Lawler went to shoot photos at McHugh Creek along Turnagain Arm of South Anchorage. Dennis edged toward a waterfall on a small ledge about 20 feet below a picnic area to photograph a waterfall. As Dennis set up his shot, he spotted what he thought was a mannequin that had been dropped at a weird angle behind a bush and partially covered in snow. Dennis got in a different position for a better look and discovered that it was really a body of a dead, partially nude woman. Sadly, that woman turned out to be Beth. When state troopers recovered the body, they noticed that Beth had a slash across her chest and her wrists were tied behind her back speaker wire. A gag had been placed over her mouth and had fallen lower across her face. It appeared as though she had been sexually assaulted, which would be confirmed the next day during her autopsy. Her blue jeans were missing, as well as her green, down-fitted parka and rubber-soled hiking boots. Authorities said it looked like Beth had managed to escape from her attacker and then fell off a ledge 50 feet from the presumed location of the murderer's car, which had been surmised to be the parking lot where donuts were in the pavement made by a car circling the roadway. She got within 10 to 15 feet of the waterfall, and that is where she stopped and froze to death. It had been blizzard-like conditions when Beth went missing, and now things were thawing, so it was hard to capture tire or boot prints. They couldn't find her missing clothes either. All they had was the wire that bound her wrists and the scraps of clothing she wore. The wire was a double-strand, black and white stereo wire, with indications it was made in Japan. One of the investigators had been all over town searching fruitlessly. Others tried businesses. Another contacted Interpol, asking if they could track down the manufacturer and identify an American outlet for the product without any luck. Beth's cousin, Greg Nicholas, was the first to come under suspicion. Besides supposedly babysitting for him that night, Beth didn't get along with her cousin. They bickered with each other since they were 4 or 5 years old. Also, their bedrooms were next to each other, and Beth didn't even want to be on the same floor as Greg. The next day, Greg and Beth's 2 brothers were interviewed at the Fly-By-Night garage, which was owned by Beth's brother, David. Troopers stated that Greg was clearly nervous while Sergeant Walter Gilmore was at the garage. He was also quivering and crying. Greg said that at 4:30 p.m. he had received a call from his cousin Ronnie, who needed a ride to meet a friend at the airport at 6 p.m. He took a quick bath, cleaned up, and left without eating dinner. He arrived at 5:30 p.m. at the Stevens residence, where he met Ronnie. The two of them then went to Fred Shenanigan's house, where they picked her up and went to the airport. Their friend was not on the plane. They then left the airport and went to Fred's brother's house. At 7:30 p.m., they arrived at Jimmy Shenanigan's house. At 8:30 p.m., they went to Fred's house. Ronnie helped Freda take some things out. Greg and Ronnie then left to go pick up Beth from her house so they could drive her to a babysitting job for Freda Shenanigan. On the way, they decided to stop at the fly-by-night garage so Ronnie could see Greg's new car. After stopping by the garage, they allegedly waited for Beth for 3 minutes at her house before giving up and going to the Montana Club in downtown Anchorage. They arrived at about 9:30 p.m. and met some friends. Greg told troopers that they stayed at the Montana Club until time unknown. He said that he had gotten really drunk and Ronnie got half-loaded. Craig's alleged timeline of where he was that night of Beth's disappearance didn't add up. Beth's brother's recollection of the events that happened were inconsistent as well. Beth's two brothers, who had been at the house with her on this 22nd, couldn't really remember what they had for dinner. They also couldn't agree on the exact time Beth had left for the buy-low. They did agree on one thing, though. They didn't see Greg after he left the house at 6 p.m. until the next day at 4 p.m. Beth's oldest brother, David, was the one who had been at the garage the night of the 22nd instead of watching the movie with the siblings. He told troopers that he thought that Beth had an abortion the month before and that the father may have been David's business partner, Eddie Tilbury. Ed Tilbury was later ruled out as a suspect because he was in Cold Bay, Alaska, 1,000 miles away at the time of Beth's disappearance. That evening, the Anchorage Suicide Prevention Center got a call from a 17-year-old boy who told him his friend's sister had been found dead at McHugh Creek because she knew too much. He admitted he had been at an Alaska Psychiatric Institute in June and had been seeing a doctor since then. He also admitted he had used a lot of grass, which was marijuana, and mescaline, which is a hallucinogenic and intoxicating compound present in mescal buttons from the peyote cactus. He insisted that he was not suicidal, just very frightened. The next day, Ronnie was brought in for an interview. Ronnie said she had called Greg and asked him for a ride to the airport. Greg met Ronnie where he was then living with Stephen's family at Thompson Manor in the Mountain View area, approximately 20 minutes away from Beth's home. He said they had smoked a joint with Greg after leaving the Stevens house at 5:30 p.m. or so. They then went to his girlfriend Freda's apartment. Freda invited them inside and Ronnie asked her if she wanted to go to the airport with them. She said yes and asked if they were drunk. They told her about the joint and then she gave them coffee and cookies. Later they went to the airport to pick up their friend Nikki, who wasn't on the plane. Greg asked Freda if she wanted to go out. She said that if she could find a babysitter, she would love to go. Greg said that his cousin Beth might babysit. He said that they then went to see Greg's car, which was at David's shop. After the shop, he said they went to Greg's house to see if Beth would babysit, and from there, they went to the Montana Club. Ronnie said that Freda asked him to call at 9 o'clock or 9:30. He called her from the Montana Club. He said that he then left Greg and cashed an Alaska Scallop Fleet check at the Alley Cat and drank 3 Calverts and a water. He made the next call to Freda at 10 o'clock or 10:30 p.m. He went back to the Montana and had 2 or 3 drinks. He then wandered around to the Elbow Room and the Ole and Joe's. He ended up at the Montana Club and went out to the Rabbit Hutch, where he said he had fell asleep on the table because he was pretty drunk. Elsie Young was allegedly with Greg at the Montana Club on the night Beth went missing. When interviewed, she stated that around 9 p.m. on the night Beth went missing, she ran into Greg at the Montana Club. He was with his cousin Ron and came over to Elsie's table. There were 3 other people sitting at the table with her, Wazali, Mary Schofield, and Clifford Dolchok. They ordered drinks. Greg had a Christian brother straight, and his cousin had whiskey and water. They talked for about 2 hours. She said that she noticed Greg had a knife in a pouch on his belt. Elsie said that she was certain Craig took her home at midnight because she checked her watch for the time because she had to go to work the next day. She said that she was with Craig the whole time and did not see Beth. Later on, Elsie was interviewed again. This time she had something to say about something that happened after Beth's disappearance. She admitted that on the night that Beth went missing, Greg hadn't taken her home. He had given her money for a taxi. She said that around midnight, she had fallen asleep on the couch when Greg came over and pounded on the door. She said she let him in, and he appeared scared as though he had been running. He said the cops were suspecting him of killing his cousin, and he wanted her to say that she was with him from 9 p.m. until midnight on the evening of Beth's disappearance. One of the people that was with Elsie the night that she met Greg at the tavern confirmed seeing Greg and Ronnie that night. Wazali said that he had left a little after 9 p.m. He said that he had gotten into an argument with Elsie, and she went into the bar while he went home. Freda Shenanigan was also interviewed around this time. She said that Greg told her that he was living with a relative who would babysit, but she told him no. She said that Greg and Ronnie tried to persuade her to go out, but she still said she didn't want to go out. And at no time did Ronnie or Craig say that they were going to call up a babysitter. Greg was also re-interviewed later. This time he volunteered some things about Ronnie. He said that Ronnie could very easily become mean. Greg then said he went to Beth to see about the babysitting because he was in a hurry. Then he went to the fly-by-night garage. He wanted to stop at the garage around 9 or 9:30. He said that Ronnie was wearing real hard boots. Greg then proceeded to draw a picture of them. Greg was then shown a photo lineup showing a number of footprints taken at McHugh Creek campground. He said that one of the footprints looked like Ronnie's shoe print. He was also shown tire tracks from the scene. Greg said it looked like they might have come from his car, and Ronnie may have been at the campground. Greg said that he did give a key to Ronnie that night. Greg said that Ron knew about him calling Beth. He was listening very close and probably on his way to pick her up. He said that if Beth was sexually molested and her hair was found, Ronnie's hair would probably look just like his. Alaska state troopers administered a polygraph test to Greg, and he passed. That result indicated he was not responsible for Beth's death. However, the polygraph operator admitted there was a possibility that the questions he asked were not geared to the actual circumstances of the investigation. Greg did show deception to 2 questions. Have you ever participated in an unnatural sex act? Have you ever used marijuana? Ronnie was re-interviewed. He said that Greg was not in contact with him, and he did not know why he would point the finger at him. He also said that he had no knowledge of Beth or how she was killed. He said that Greg never told him anything concerning Beth, and he had no knowledge or involvement in Beth's death. He also did not believe Greg was involved either. Ronnie did say, however, that he wasn't with Greg the whole time at the Montana Club. He said he had walked back and gave Greg a $10 bill, that he was going to the Alley Cat and cash a check. Which was weird because Greg said in his interview that he gave Ronnie $20 because he was broke. By the time Greg's car was searched for physical evidence, it had been in an accident with a moose. There was hair and blood all over the car from the moose, and they couldn't find anything to link Greg to Beth's disappearance or her death. The Tiki Room was in the Tropics Hotel on Spaniard Road and was across the street from the fly-by-night garage. School friends of Beth, Andrea Taggart and Louise Hawkins, were in the Tiki Room the night of December 22nd at approximately 1 a.m. Andrea said that she went to the bathroom and Beth was sitting on the counter facing the door with her back to the mirror. She said that Beth didn't look good at all. Beth was wearing a green ski jacket and a scarf. Her hair looked dirty and messy. Andrea told Beth hi. Andrea told troopers that Beth looked at her, smiled, like if she should have known her. Andrea said that she then went into the bathroom stall. When she came out and fixed her hair, Beth was still standing there. Andrea asked Beth how she was. Beth replied, "I am really blown away." With that, Andrea said okay and then left the bathroom. They said that Beth came out of the bathroom 15 to 20 minutes later. Andrea watched as Beth walked up to a tall man standing next to the bar. The man was white, 6 feet or 6 feet 2 inches, with skinny legs. He weighed about 180 pounds. He was wearing an olive-colored military-type parka with a full hood and wolf appearance around it. He had jeans and black shoes on. His hair was dark brown, 1 or 2 inches below the ear. He was not well kempt. He was about 22 or 24 years old or younger. He had a large nose. She did not notice beard or glasses. Beth hung her head and looked droopy. The man appeared to be getting some change, and both walked into the lobby area. In a minute or two, they returned and walked through the entire bar area and out the back door of the Tiki Room. Louise had just about the same count of events as Andrea, with slight variations. She said the man was thin and tall, 5 feet 8 inches to 6 feet tall, early to mid-20s, with long, dark brown hair. She said he may have been wearing light, horn-rimmed glasses and possibly a few days of beard growth on his face. The bartender and the waitress who were working the night of Beth's disappearance were also interviewed. Neither remembered seeing Beth. In going through Beth's things in order to try to find some clues as to what happened, Beth's mother found some letters. In one of the letters, Beth had written, "It's not fun to date anymore." Beth's ex-fiancé, William Frederick Smith, was in the military. He was stationed in Fairbanks at the time of Beth's disappearance. His brother could account for his whereabouts since December 21st. Within a week of Beth's disappearance, troopers found yet another pair of witnesses who had reportedly seen Beth on the same day she went missing. They said they saw her in the Valium Mart at around 3:30 p.m. or 4:30 p.m. They went to the bathroom and entered one of the stalls, sat down, and then they heard someone say, "Get up off the floor, Beth." After they were done, they opened the door to the stall and saw Beth sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. She had no shoes or socks. She had a green coat on, her hair was wet, she wore dungarees, and her feet looked purple from the cold. She was smoking a cigarette. When the witness asked Beth what was wrong, she answered that her feet were cold and she didn't have any shoes. The witness then asked Beth if she wanted the store manager to be called. Beth replied with a no and said that she had walked a long way, then said she had to walk to Bilo and meet someone in the parking lot. Beth's description and what she was wearing had already been circulated in the papers, so it is unclear if the witnesses were telling the truth or not. The day after the news of Beth's murder hit the papers, Sergeant Walter Gilmore got a phone call from a senior officer in the Alaska State Troopers claiming that he had an informant that may be able to help. 18-year-old Patty Roberts was working as a prostitute to pay for her addiction to heroin. On the night of December 19th, she was in the parking lot of the Nevada Club when she was kidnapped at gunpoint by a man who said he'd kill her if she didn't do what he wanted. She described him as being between 23 and 28 years old, 5'8" or 5'9", with a slender build, and wearing horn-rimmed glasses. He had bound her hands with leather laces, then drove her south on the Seward Highway. Along the way, he kept pulling off the road, telling her he wanted to make love to her while trying to kiss her. He made her strip and said that he wanted to slash her bra with his knife. She kept telling him, "No, I don't want to do that in the car." He finally got a motel deep in the Kenai Peninsula of Cooper Landing, 98 miles south of Anchorage. They tried to have sex, but he was impotent. On the way back to Anchorage, he threatened to kill her if she said anything about what happened. At some point, he drove her deep into the wilderness, and she had begun to beg for him to drive back to civilization. Troopers pulled out their book of criminals, and Patty pointed to Robert Christian Hansen, later known as serial killer Butcher Baker. Robert had been arrested the month before for an assault with a deadly weapon involving a real estate secretary. Then he kidnapped Patty. He was out on his own recognizance awaiting trial. Patty told investigators, "He said he'd killed before, and everything he said was absolutely true. Everything he said he would do to me came true. Everything he said he would do, he did. Every threat he made, I believed. And if he says he's killed people, I believe he's killed people. And if you've got a young girl who's been killed around the same time in the same area, then I believe it was Hansen who killed her. I believe he'll kill me too." Police interviewed Robert Hansen on December 29th. He claimed to have only vague memories of Patty and asked to speak with his attorney. Robert did end up making a handwritten statement as to his whereabouts on December 22nd, and in it he underlined the time 10:30.
Went to work at 4:45 December 22nd, 1971. Got through work at 2 p.m., went home to 327 Thomas Court. Spent the rest of the afternoon from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. with my wife and sister-in-law and daughter, then left to Larry Bivens on 6th Street for pizza supper. Left there about 10:30, went home with my wife and daughter. Went to bed about 11 p.m., got up again about 4:30 dressed, and arrived at work about 4:45 a.m. Thursday, and worked until 2 p.m.
He seemed well aware of the timeline when Beth disappeared and had an alibi. Robert Hansen was arrested and convicted in 1983 and was sentenced to 461 years without the possibility of parole for the abduction, rape, and murder of at least 17 women in and around Anchorage, Alaska. As a part of his plea bargain that took the death penalty off the table, he marked on a map of where to find his victims' bodies. He marked the area with X's. There was an X where Beth's body had been found. Zazie Mason was a 20-year-old airline employee who was hitching to town on her day off. Her half-clothed, sexually assaulted body was found on August 28, 1972. There were some distinctive tire tracks left at the scene, where all the tires should have been knobby edges, biting outward to provide more grip. One of the edges was biting inward. Shortly after Zizi's body was discovered, a woman who identified herself as the girlfriend of a man who was in the white four-wheel drive truck on the day Zizi Mason was murdered called authorities. She told them she wanted to make sure that they were looking for the right person in the truck that day. That person was not her boyfriend, but someone else named Gary Zeger. When they talked to the boyfriend, he confirmed that he and Gary had gone for target practice near the gravel pit and had picked up a female hitchhiker. They left the gravel pit with a young woman riding in the middle. He said that then Zeger dropped him off at a nearby fire station. After that, Gary and the female continued on their way. Authorities obtained a search warrant for Zeger's truck and ran a precipitant test on 3 small blood spots splashed up by the dash in the interior of the vehicle. The test came back positive, which indicated human blood. The site near a creek where Zeger had washed the truck, those same weird tire tracks were found. Gary Zeger ended up going to trial but was acquitted of Zizi's murder. After his release, a trooper pulled over Zeger and searched his truck. 2 cases of dynamite and 11 pounds of marijuana were found. Zeger was arrested and taken to Anchorage, where he was jailed on a $50,000 bond. He was charged with burglary, grand theft larceny, and possession of narcotic with intent to sell. Zeger's friend that he met in prison, Wesley Ladd, put down the cash bond, which had been previously reduced to $15,000. Ladd wanted to control a massage parlor owned by a man named John Rich. Zeger and Ladd paid him a visit, and Zeger ended up shooting and killing John. Zeger's trial for the marijuana and the dynamite came 2 months later after John's murder, and he was convicted on all counts. He decided to appeal the ruling, but Zeger didn't have any money to do that, so he hatched a plan. Jimmy Sumter owned 2 of Anchorage's most popular topless joints, the Kit Kat Club and the Sportsman, too, and he was known to keep a stash of cash at his house. A month later, Jimmy's house was broken into while he was checking on his clubs. The intruder shot and killed his wife and son. Only his daughter made it out alive. The intruder escaped with $20,000 in cash and jewelry. Canvassing Sumter's neighborhood, troopers came across a woman who'd seen a Dodge pickup truck leave the scene. She had taken its license plate number, and it ended up belonging to Gary Zeger. Zeger was then served with a warrant to impound his truck in connection with the Sumter murders. While the authorities were getting ready to arrest Gary Zeger, somebody else got to him first. He was found at mile 110 of Seward Highway, just up the road from where Beth Van Zanten had been murdered. He was sprawled in the middle of the pavement with a fatal shotgun blast to his belly. Wire that was similar to which Beth had been bound was found at his house, but the FBI said it wasn't a match. There were people who suggested that Zeger looked a lot like the composite picture of the man allegedly seen with Beth on the night of her disappearance. There was also an informant who told investigators that Beth's cousin Gary had lived with Zeger in the months after her death, when he presumably was no longer welcome in the Van Zanten household. Beth's murder remains unsolved.